The discovery of betrayal, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the UES Prometheus, her weathered hands gripping the edge of the holographic display table. At 54, she had seen humanity's rise from a single world to a respected member of the Galactic Council. The stars beyond the viewport had once seemed full of promise and friendship. Today, they held only questions and growing dread. The distress beacon from Kepler Colony had been broadcasting for 3 days straight, an automated signal that sent chills down every human spine who heard it. The message was simple and terrifying. Emergency evacuation protocols initiated. Hostile forces detected. Request immediate assistance. What made it worse was the silence that followed. No follow-up communications. No status reports. Nothing but that haunting automated plea echoing across the void. Commander David Park approached the Admiral's station, his young face creased with worry. He had been assigned to the Prometheus just 6 months ago, fresh from the academy and eager to serve in humanity's growing fleet. The excitement in his eyes had been replaced by something harder, more determined. Admiral long-range sensors confirm it, Commander Park reported, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. Kepler Colony is gone. The entire orbital platform has been reduced to debris. We're reading massive energy signatures, consistent with military-grade plasma bombardment. Sarah felt her heart sink, though her expression remained composed. Kepler Colony housed over 2 million civilians, including many human families who had chosen to live alongside their Thornian neighbors. The Thornians were one of humanity's closest allies, a species of tall, graceful beings with crystalline skin that changed colors with their emotions. They were master engineers and had helped humans develop better fusion technology in exchange for agricultural techniques that had transformed their arid homeworld into a garden paradise. What about Thornia Prime? Sarah asked, though she feared. She already knew the answer. Commander Park's jaw tightened. The entire system is dark, Admiral. No communications, no energy signatures from their cities. We're detecting massive amounts of radiation consistent with scorched earth tactics. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Every officer present understood what this meant. The Thornians were not just allies. They were friends. Human children had grown up playing with young Thornians in the colony's recreational areas. Families had creating beautiful hybrid communities that represented the best of galactic cooperation, Dr. Elena Rodriguez. The ship's xenobiologist and cultural expert stepped forward from her monitoring station. She had spent 5 years living on Thornia Prime, studying their unique metabolism and helping establish the agricultural exchange programs that had made both species prosper. "Admiral, I need to show you something," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "We've been monitoring galactic communication networks for the past 72 hours. I've detected encrypted transmissions between Council ships that were supposedly on peaceful missions in neutral sectors." Sarah followed Dr. Rodriguez to her workstation, where a complex array of data streams painted a picture that made her blood run cold. The intercepts showed massive fleet movements coordinated between 5 major Council species: the Hegemony, the Vorthan Empire, the Krell Consortium, the Nexus Federation, and the Zephyrian Alliance. "Look at the timestamps," Dr. Rodriguez continued, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. These movements began 3 weeks before the attack on Kepler Colony. They positioned fleets at strategic points throughout Thornian space, cutting off all escape routes and communication relays. Commander Park leaned over to examine the data more closely. This wasn't a spontaneous attack or a border dispute gone wrong. This was a planned extermination campaign. Sarah studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had spent 30 years in military service. The attack pattern was methodical and brutal, designed not just to defeat an enemy, but to ensure complete annihilation. Every Thornian world had been hit simultaneously, preventing any possibility of evacuation or mutual defense. Why? Sarah asked quietly. The Thornians were peaceful. They never threatened anyone. Their only crime was being too successful at technology. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up another set of files, these ones showing economic and technological reports from the past 5 years. That might be exactly why they were targeted, Admiral. The Thornians developed atmospheric processors that could transform dead worlds into paradise in just 50 years instead of centuries. They were sharing this technology freely with any species that wanted it. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Terraforming technology was one of the primary sources of power and influence for the major council species. They controlled which worlds could be settled and which species would be granted colonization rights. If the Thornians had made that technology freely available, it would have shifted the entire balance of galactic power. Lieutenant Marcus Torres approached from the communications station, his face pale with shock. Admiral, we're receiving a coded transmission from Earth Command, Priority Alpha encryption. Sarah accepted the data chip and inserted it into her personal reader. The message was from Admiral Jonathan Hayes, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's military hierarchy and her former mentor. What she read there made her realize that the attack on the Thornians was just the beginning. The Council has issued a formal declaration, Sarah announced to her senior staff. They claimed the Thornians were developing weapons of mass destruction and posed a threat to galactic stability. They're demanding that all species surrender any Thornian technology in their possession for security evaluation. Commander Park's hands clenched into fists. Lies. I've seen Thornian technology. They couldn't hurt a fly if they wanted to. Their entire culture is built around creation and growth, not destruction. Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The worst part is that some species are actually believing the Council's propaganda. Fear makes people accept terrible things as necessary evils. Sarah walked back to the main display, her mind racing through the strategic implications. If the Council was willing to commit genocide to maintain their power structure, no species was truly safe. Today it was the Thornians, tomorrow it could be humanity or any other species that became too independent or successful. There's more, Sarah said, reading further into Admiral Hayes' message. Our intelligence networks have uncovered evidence of similar attacks throughout galactic history. At least 8 species have been mysteriously wiped out over the past 2 centuries, always with the same pattern. First, they develop something revolutionary. Then they face accusations of being dangerous. Finally, they disappear entirely. Lieutenant Torres pulled up historical records on his screen. The architects who created self-repairing cities, gone. The dreamweavers who developed perfect virtual reality technology, extinct. The songbirds whose music could heal psychological trauma, vanished without a trace. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. The Council maintained their dominance by eliminating any species that might challenge their technological or cultural supremacy. They had created a galactic civilization built on fear and controlled scarcity. Commander Park stood straighter, his young face set with determination. What are our orders, Admiral? Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same mixture of grief and anger reflected in every face. These were good people who had joined the military to protect humanity and its allies. They had believed in the promise of a peaceful galactic community where different species could work together for mutual benefit. Admiral Hayes is recalling all human ships to Earth space, Sarah announced. We're withdrawing from all joint operations and Council missions immediately. Humanity is formally declaring its intention to investigate the Thornian genocide independently. Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. That's going to be seen as a hostile act by the Council. Good, Sarah replied, her voice hard as steel. Let them know we're not going to stand by and watch them murder innocent people. The Thornians trusted us to protect them, and we failed. I won't let their deaths be meaningless. The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity as the Prometheus changed course for Earth and began coordinating with other human vessels scattered throughout the galaxy. Sarah was amazed to learn how many ships Admiral Hayes had managed to deploy without the Council's knowledge. Humanity had been quietly building a fleet that was both larger and more advanced than their supposed allies realized. Captain Maria Santos contacted them from the UES Defiance, a heavy cruiser that had been conducting scientific surveys in the Outer Rim territories. Her ship alone carried enough firepower to level a small moon, though it was officially classified as a research vessel. Admiral Chen, Captain Santos, reported over the secure channel, "We've completed our reconnaissance of the former Thornian territories. The devastation is complete, but we've found something interesting. The Council fleets used a specific type of plasma weapon that leaves a unique radiation signature." Sarah leaned forward with interest. What kind of signature? The kind that can only be produced by weapons designed specifically to target Thornian physiology, Captain Santos replied grimly. These weren't general-purpose military weapons. Someone spent years developing arms specifically designed to kill Thornians as efficiently as possible. The revelation sent a chill through everyone on the bridge. This hadn't been a spontaneous act of aggression or even a calculated military strike. This had been a premeditated genocide, planned in advance, with scientific precision. Commander Park spoke up. Admiral, if they developed Thornian-specific weapons, what's to stop them from developing human-specific ones? Our physiology and genetics are well documented in Council databases. Sarah nodded slowly. That's exactly what Admiral Hayes is concerned about. Intelligence suggests that humanity is next on their list. Our democratic government and independent military make us a threat to their authoritarian model. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up another set of data files. I've been analyzing Council communications patterns over the past year. There's been a significant increase in discussions about the human problem and the need to bring humanity into line with proper galactic protocols. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The Council had identified humanity as their next target, probably due to Earth's refusal to adopt their rigid hierarchical social structures and surrender control of human colonies to Council oversight. Lieutenant Torres announced that they were receiving communications from other human ships throughout the galaxy. The message was spreading quickly. Humanity was pulling back from all Council operations and preparing for the possibility of war. Sarah opened a ship-wide communication channel, knowing that her words would be recorded and transmitted to Earth. Command history would judge how humanity responded to this moment of crisis. "Crew of the Prometheus," she began, her voice carrying the weight of both grief and determination. "Today we learned that our friends and allies, the Thornians, were not just attacked but completely exterminated by the very organization we trusted to maintain galactic peace. This was not war. This was murder on an unimaginable scale. She paused, letting the reality sink in for everyone listening. The Council wants us to believe that the Thornians were dangerous, that their destruction was necessary for galactic security. But we know the truth. They were killed because they dared to share their gifts freely, because they refused to bow to the Council's monopoly on progress and hope. Sarah's voice grew stronger, reflecting the resolve that was building not just in her, but throughout. The human fleet, we are returning to Earth, not in retreat, but in preparation. If the Council thinks they can intimidate humanity into submission by murdering our friends, they have gravely underestimated what it means to be human. The ship responded with a cheer that echoed through every corridor and compartment. These men and women had joined the military to protect what they loved, and now they finally had a clear mission. Ensure that what happened to the Thornians would never happen again. As the Prometheus jumped to hyperspace, heading back toward Earth at maximum speed. Sarah stood alone in her ready room, staring at a holographic image of Thornia Prime as it had been just a week ago. Beautiful crystal cities had stretched toward purple skies, while Thornian children played in gardens that bloomed with impossible colors. Now there was nothing but radioactive ash where a civilization had once thrived, but their memory would live on, and their deaths would not be in vain. Humanity had learned a terrible lesson about the true nature of galactic politics, and they would ensure that lesson was not forgotten. The Council had made their choice when they decided to solve problems through genocide rather than diplomacy. Now they would learn what happened when you backed humanity into a corner and threatened everything they held dear. Earth's warships were coming home, and when they returned to the galaxy, they would carry a message written in fire and steel. Never again, asterisk. Earth's answer 3 months had passed since the Thornian genocide, and Earth had transformed from a peaceful member of the galactic community into a fortress preparing for war. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed Strategic Command Center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of thousands of ships. Scattered throughout human space, the room buzzed with activity as officers coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. What the Council didn't realize was that humanity had never really disarmed after joining the galactic community. They had simply become very good at hiding their true military capabilities behind the facade of exploration and research vessels. General Marcus Webb, Earth's supreme military commander, approached Sarah's station carrying a data tablet filled with intelligence reports. At 62, he was one of the few officers who remembered humanity's pre-council military doctrine, when survival had depended on being ready to fight anyone, anywhere, at any time. Sarah, our reconnaissance teams have finished mapping Council fleet positions, General Webb announced, his gravelly voice filled with satisfaction. They've made a critical error. They're so confident in their technological superiority that they've spread their forces thin across dozens of systems. Sarah studied the tactical display showing red markers indicating Council fleets and blue markers showing human forces. The enemy had more ships overall, but they were scattered and unprepared for coordinated resistance. Humanity, on the other hand, had spent 3 months preparing for exactly this kind of asymmetric warfare. Commander Jessica Liu stepped forward from the communications station, her young face set with determination. She had lost her brother in a research station that had been conducting joint operations with Thornian scientists when the genocide began. Her personal stake in this conflict made her one of the most motivated officers in the fleet. Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from all sector commanders, Commander Liu reported. Operation Righteous Fury is ready to commence on your orders. 237 ships in position, with full stealth capabilities engaged. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders. In the next few hours, humanity would either establish itself as a force to be reckoned with, or face extinction at the hands of the Council's overwhelming numbers. There was no middle ground, no possibility of negotiation after what had been done to the Thorn IANS. Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered the command center, carrying her specialized equipment for monitoring galactic communications. Over the past 3 months, she had become humanity's primary intelligence asset, intercepting and decoding Council transmissions to track their military movements and political discussions. Admiral, we've intercepted communications confirming our worst fears, Dr. Rodriguez announced grimly. The Council is planning what they call Operation Clean Slate. They intend to eliminate not just humanity, but 17 other species they consider problematic or unreliable. Sarah felt her blood run cold. The scope of the Council's planned genocide was staggering. Billions of innocent beings across dozens of worlds were marked for death simply because they refused to conform to the Council's vision of proper galactic civilization. General Webb pulled up a star chart showing the targeted species territories. The Altarians, because their democratic ideals influence neighboring systems. The Cetaceans, because their pacifist philosophy undermines military recruitment. The Makers, because their artistic achievements attract too much cultural attention, away from Council worlds. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Any species that offered an alternative to the Council's authoritarian model was scheduled for elimination. The galaxy would become a homogeneous empire where creativity, independence, and cultural diversity were extinct. Commander Lu's communication station lit up with incoming messages from human agents embedded throughout Council space. These brave men and women had spent months gathering intelligence while pretending to continue their diplomatic and scientific missions. Admiral Agent Thompson reports from Hegemony Prime, Commander Liu announced. The Council leadership is meeting in emergency session. They're discussing accelerating their timeline because they're concerned about human fleet movements. Sarah smiled grimly. Good, let them be concerned. Dr. Rodriguez, are our broadcast systems ready? Dr. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. We've hacked into every major communication network in Council space. When you give the word, every species in the galaxy will receive our message simultaneously. Sarah walked to the center of the command room, where a recording station had been prepared. The message she was about to deliver would change galactic history forever. Either it would inspire other species to join humanity in resisting the Council's tyranny, or it would be her final transmission before Earth was reduced to radioactive ash. Begin recording, Sarah commanded, her voice clear and strong. The recording equipment activated, and Sarah found herself looking into the camera that would carry her words to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. She thought of the Thornian children she had seen playing in Kepler Colony's gardens, now dead because of Council ambitions. Citizens of the galaxy, Sarah began, her voice carrying both grief and determination. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Forces. 3 months ago, we discovered that the Galactic Council, the organization we trusted to maintain peace and stability, committed an act of genocide so horrific that it defies comprehension. Sarah activated a holographic display showing before and after images of Thornian worlds. The Thornians were our friends and allies. Their only crime was developing technology that could transform dead worlds into gardens of life. They shared this gift freely with any species that wanted it, threatening no one except the Council's monopoly on progress. The display shifted to show intercepted Council communications and military records. The evidence is undeniable. The Council planned and executed the systematic murder of 6 billion innocent beings. But the Thornians were not their only target. We have proof that the Council plans to eliminate any species that refuses to submit to their authoritarian control. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. 17 species are currently marked for extermination, their only crime being the desire to maintain their cultural independence and democratic values. Today, humanity says no more. We will not stand by while peaceful civilizations are murdered to maintain the Council's grip on power. The display changed to show human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. As I speak, human forces are moving to engage Council fleets across dozens of systems. We go not as conquerors, but as liberators. We fight not for territory or resources, but for the right of all species to exist free from the threat of genocide. Sarah looked directly into the camera, her eyes reflecting the determination that had carried humanity from a single world to the stars. To our friends among the galaxy's many species, you are not alone. Join us, and together we will build a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination, on creativity rather than conformity. The recording ended, and Dr. Rodriguez immediately began transmitting it across every communication network she had accessed. Within minutes, the message would reach every inhabited system in known space. General Webb activated the tactical display, showing the positions of human strike forces. Admiral, all ships report ready for combat operations. Operation Righteous Fury is authorized to commence. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that she was about to unleash the most devastating military campaign in galactic history. Execute Operation Righteous Fury. Show the Council what happens when you threaten humanity and its friends. Across the galaxy, human ships decloaked simultaneously in dozens of star systems. The Council's scattered fleets suddenly found themselves facing opponents they had not expected to exist. The humans had hidden their true military capabilities for decades, disguising dreadnoughts as cargo vessels and battle cruisers as scientific exploration ships. Captain Maria Santos led the assault on the hegemony's primary military base, her heavy cruiser U.S. Defiance, spearheading a force of 30 ships against what the enemy thought was a lightly defended research facility. The Council defenders were completely unprepared for the coordinated precision of the human attack. Target their command and control systems first, Captain Santos ordered her weapons officer. We want them to know they're defeated before we destroy them. The battle was swift and decisive. Human weapons technology, developed in secret over decades of supposed peaceful cooperation, proved devastatingly effective against Council designs. Plasma cannons that could punch through any known armor, missile systems with targeting algorithms that made evasion impossible, and electronic warfare capabilities that turned enemy ships into floating debris. Commander Park, now captain of his own vessel, led a strike force against a Council fleet that had been preparing to attack the Altarian homeworld. His ship, the UES Justice, was officially listed as a diplomatic transport but carried enough firepower to engage a full battle squadron. For the Thornians, Captain Park whispered as his ship opened fire on the lead Council dreadnought. The enemy vessel's shields collapsed under the assault, and secondary explosions tore through its hull as human weapons found their targets with surgical precision. Throughout Council space, Similar scenes played out as human forces demonstrated that they had never been the peaceful, naive species their enemies had assumed. Earth had learned from every conflict in human history, developing tactics and technologies that combined the best aspects of guerrilla warfare with overwhelming firepower. Dr. Rodriguez monitored communications from the battle zones, her face lighting up with each report of human victory. Admiral, early results are exceeding all projections. Council forces are suffering 90% casualty rates in the first wave of attacks. Sarah felt no satisfaction in the destruction, only grim determination to see justice done. What about civilian casualties? Minimal, Dr. Rodriguez replied. Our forces are following strict rules of engagement. Military targets only, with evacuation warnings provided wherever possible. The contrast with the Council's genocide of the Thornians could not have been clearer. Where the Council had targeted civilians for systematic extermination, humanity focused their fury exclusively on military assets and government installations. General Webb pulled up damage assessments from across the combat zones. Sarah, we've effectively neutralized the Council's ability to conduct large-scale military operations. Their remaining fleets are scattered and demoralized. But the real victory came when Dr. Rodriguez announced that other species were responding to humanity's call for resistance. Admiral, we're receiving messages from Altarian defense forces, Cetacean patrol vessels, and Maker colony ships. They're joining our operations and providing intelligence on remaining Council positions. Sarah smiled for the first time in months. Humanity's gamble had paid off. By demonstrating that the Council could be defeated and by revealing the truth about their genocidal plans, Earth had inspired other species to stand up for their own freedom. The final phase of Operation Righteous Fury targeted the Council's leadership directly. Human special forces, using stealth technology derived from decades of covert operations, infiltrated the primary government centers of each Council species and arrested the individuals responsible for ordering the Thornian genocide. Within 72 hours, the war was over. The Council's military forces were destroyed, their leadership in custody, and their authority completely shattered. Species across the galaxy were declaring their independence and forming new alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. Admiral, Sarah Chen stood once again in the Strategic Command Center, but now the atmosphere was one of cautious celebration rather than grim preparation. The holographic displays showed human ships patrolling former Council territories, not as conquerors but as peacekeepers, ensuring that the transition to freedom proceeded smoothly. General Webb approached her station, carrying reports from across the galaxy. Sarah, preliminary casualty reports are in. We lost 43 ships and approximately 2,000 personnel. Council losses exceeded 90% of their military assets. Sarah bowed her head in respect for the human lives lost in the campaign. Each death weighed heavily on her conscience, but she knew that their sacrifice had prevented the genocide of 17 species and countless billions of innocent beings. Commander Liu announced that diplomatic representatives from dozens of species were requesting meetings to discuss the formation of a new galactic government. Admiral, they want humanity to lead the transition to a democratic galactic federation. Sarah shook her head. No, we didn't fight this war to replace the Council's tyranny with our own. We fought to ensure that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her communication station with tears in her eyes. Admiral, I'm receiving a message from the few Thornian survivors who were off-world when the genocide occurred. They want to thank humanity for avenging their people and ensuring that their deaths were not in vain. Sarah felt her own eyes moisten as she realized that their mission had been accomplished. The Thornians would be remembered not as victims of senseless genocide, but as martyrs whose sacrifice had awakened the galaxy to the true nature of tyranny. The war was over, but the work of building a better galactic civilization was just beginning. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest oppressors could be defeated when free peoples stood together in defense of their common values. The Council had thought they could solve their problems through genocide and intimidation. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human spirit since Earth joined the galactic community. They had reminded humanity why their ancestors had fought so hard for freedom and democracy. Earth's warships had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. Never again would peaceful species live in fear of extermination for the crime of being different. The age of the Council was over, and the age of galactic freedom had begun. As Sarah looked out at the stars through the command center's viewport, she saw not the cold vastness of space, but a galaxy full of possibilities, where different species could work together as equals rather than subjects of an authoritarian empire. The Thornians were gone, but their dream of a better galaxy lived on in the hearts of every being who now breathed free, and humanity would stand guard to ensure that dream could never be destroyed again. Asterisk.